This section will look at how Preedies was developed. Going back briefly, my career as speech and language therapist, towards the end, I was working far more with children with literacy problems and teenagers with literacy problems. And during that time, discovered an awful lot of children, their literacy problems have stemmed from the developmental stages of playing with sounds. And you peel the onion skins back on these children and find they've never played with sounds, they've never used them as a toy. Now, okay, the government's doing something about it. They've introduced the Year 1 phonics test, which is brilliant, it's a step in the right direction. It's making the children at an early age start to work on the sounds that they're dealing with when they're writing, which has had a brilliant effect. But the pass rate, the national pass rate, the latest figures I saw for the phonics test is 76%. So it's a really lovely figure until you then turn it on its head and you say, okay, 76% pass rate, that's 24% of failing. That actually goes down to 1 in 4. And, you've got, say, 40 children in the nursery, 10 of them are going to fail the phonics test. The first thing they experience when they get to school are the testing, and they're failing at that rate. And that really, we need to do something about it. We need to stop that happening. So that's why you as a nursery have taken on this Preedies programme, that you're willing to put the skills in there for those children to understand and play with sounds. When they have these difficulties, they present with difficulties with rhyming, being able to hear and produce rhyme, awareness of syllables, that's the bounces that we hear in the word, alliteration, that's when you've got words that start with the same sound, like horrid Henry and things like that, that's alliteration, and spoonerisms. And I don't know, does anybody know what spoonerisms are?
Replacing words.
It's that sort of thing. Spoonerisms are when we swap sounds around at the beginnings of words, and it's a lovely trick. And if nothing else, you go away with this and you take this as a toy to play with children, and you chop sounds around. And we all do it sometimes accidentally. This morning I walked across the park arc instead of the car park, and it makes you stop and think, and sometimes they happen naturally, but sometimes you can generate them, and if you can generate them for a child, it makes them stop and think. And my grandchildren were around the other day, and I said to them, who wants mocklet chilk? And they go, oh yes, please, Granny. They chopped it around in their head, and they, mocklet chilk, it's chocolate milk. And that's a toy, and that makes a child's brain play with sounds. And if you take nothing else away, if you do that every day, just generate one spoonerism, and it just gets those brains working. So there's a lot of new literacy programmes being rolled out, and I've looked at lots of them now. As far as I've seen to date, the majority of them that are out there all starts with letters. So even, you've got your 2-year-olds coming in, all the phonics programmes start with the letter. And this is where Preedies differs. It doesn't start with the letters, because what we're looking at is tackling them playing with sounds. And letters in their own right have no meaning. It's making their brain think about and hear the sounds first of all. So we're looking at that before we have the letters. And we're going to set those foundation skills in place. So we're going to send our children into school with a sound knowledge before they get their letters. They'll get their letters, they'll have something to hang them on to. Now, right at the start, I introduced my children's names. And I explained to you that we have Edward and Sarah, and there was one other. And I just wonder if any of you can remember what his name was. And brilliant, because James was close, Jason was close, fantastic. You're on the right lines, that's the right target to go for. But actually, very unusual, it's a bit obscure, so sometimes, but his name's Jasper. But interestingly, what happens is that you've all queued in to the j sound at the start. And you knew it was something beginning with j, but you couldn't quite sort of come up with it. And that's simply because that proves the point that we use that very first sound in the word to jog our memory. And by doing that, it sort of opens up a part of the brain. If you think all the words stored in your brain are like in filing cabinets, and if you can remember the first sound in that word, then it's immediately reduced the filing cabinet that you've got to look into. So you remembered the j sound and came up with, you know, a fairly expected j name. So that's the value of that first sound, the value of listening for those sounds and the pathways in the brain.